Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. My co-host for today's show is Joyce K. Gatchenberger, and our guest is Judith C. Owens-Lalude. Is that correct, Judith?
That was beautifully
All right.
said.
Thank you. And the topic is the power of a children's story. So let's start today with a few fun quips and quotes, and I'm going to start. A children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest, and that was C.S. Lewis. And Joyce, you want to take the next one?
Certainly. Writing for children is bloody difficult. Books for children are as complex as their adult counterparts, and they should therefore be accorded the same respect. And that's by Mark Haddon.
And here's another opinion on that. Children's books are deceptively simple. I admit that. But for me, all my life, I try to simplify things. As a child in school, things were very hard for me to understand often, and I developed a knack. I developed a process to simplify things so I would understand them. And that's Eric Carle. And Judith, would you like to take the next one?
I would. I'm probably more pleased with my children's books than with my adult stories. Children's books are harder to write. It's tougher to keep a child interested because a child doesn't have to have the concentration of an adult. A child knows the television is in the next room. Roald Dahl.
And that is true.
Yeah.
And you know, the reason we pick these quotes is because it's interesting if you read each one or listen to each one. One says it's easy, one says it's hard, next one says it's difficult. And I think we're going to get into that in a little bit on, our process for writing children's stories. Because I know Judith writes children's stories, I write children's stories, and you have comments, you have some things you want to talk to us about as well.
Yes, and I have children in my upcoming book, too.
Yeah, so we're going to really get into that in a minute and debate this whole thing. Our guest is Judith C. Owens-Lalude, and Judith is a native of Louisville, Kentucky. She has over 38 years experience conducting workshops, seminars, and classes for adults, teens, and children. Judith is a graduate of, let me get to my glasses adjust here. She is a graduate of Kentucky State University, Frankfort, Kentucky, where she received a Bachelor of Science degree and later earned a Master of Arts from California State University, Long Beach, California. She has a lifetime certification in adult education from California Department of Education. Judith is married to a doctor and has 2 sons. In 2012, Judith published her first novel, The Long Walk, Slavery to Freedom, and later Miss Lucy, Slave and Civil War Nurse, and several more books. She is the founder and director of J. Camille Cultural Academy, established in 2002. That was from a grant from the Kentucky Foundation for Women in 2002. Judith was able to continue her work with the Children's Picture Book Writing Workshop that she started in 2001. She is the author of the children's book Kaleidoscope Kids, The Midnight Boy from South Sudan, Peas and Popover, and then also Boo, That's My Pumpkin, and more. All right, Judith, what else can you tell us about yourself?
Well, I can tell you that I'm a hard worker and I'm addicted to writing.
All right.
And also that passage I read, that quote was true. I started out writing children's picture book manuscripts. I must have written about 75, but I was in the process of learning and studying. And I knew that I needed an illustrator, and I could not do a full book illustration. And that those manuscripts, it is very difficult to write children's stories.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult. And I found that when I kind of went over into the young adult, that gave me longer sentences and more words, and I was able to create more story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the, we're going to go ahead and just jump right into this. Okay. One of the things that I find, for me, writing children's stories is easy. And I'm going to tell you why. I don't think about writing a children's story. When I sit down, I wrote the book that was just published, The Purple Caterpillar, in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But now it's been edited by someone since. But I wrote that story in 1 hour, the complete version in poem. But in prose. I have 3 other children's stories that I wrote, and I probably put a little more thought into those. Mm-hmm. But it was always out of pleasure. I really enjoyed writing them, and they were about something that I saw or knew or experienced. So I didn't go into it thinking, I'm going to write this as a children's story. You know, a lot of times we go to write a children's story and we're thinking about what age group are we looking at? Are we looking at first graders, second graders, third graders? Are we looking at young adult? Because I know you would talk to us earlier about how you took a children's story, turned it into a young adult story, and then later on into a novel.
Yes, and that was The Long Walk, Slavery to Freedom. That story has more growth than any story or book that I've written. But yes, what makes the picture book difficult to write is you cannot duplicate what's seen in the illustration. That's where the challenge is. But I found that writing children's early readers chapter books and middle grade chapter books took that stress away. And I'd like to share a quote if
Sure.
I can. Okay, Dan Hadi, who is a professor at Penn State.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Who is a Penn State professor of language and literacy, said, children's literature is the only class of literature not produced by those who read it. This fact gives authors and publishers an extra measure of power and responsibility over the content they produce, which just gave me an ah. I said, yes, that's right. So we have a lot of control, and control can be fun.
Yes.
It can be fun.
And Joyce, you wanted to share something with us that you had found as well.
Yes, I was looking on the internet, so you always get a variety. I'm sure Judith knows this too. You get a variety of resources when you're doing writing. And I went to the internet and I looked at the current Amazon bestseller list for children's books. And the first one they have on there is called The Wonky Donkey.
Okay.
And it has a wonderful picture on the front of a donkey kind of looking at you with a sly look sideways. The next one is Dogman, the Lord of the Fleas. And again, it has a appropriate picture that would go along with that title. And I'll just read one more. It says The Meltdown, the Diary of the Wimpy Kid book. And again, has a picture appropriate for that title. So it's something, like Judith was saying, that's appropriate for children that would get their attention, but it was it was written by an adult.
Right. And those were wonderful titles because they're catchy.
Yeah.
And catchy is what sells.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that is important. Again, for me, the title was just something that came along exactly. I just named my books after what the story is about. My one book's about a purple caterpillar, the purple caterpillar. I have another book called The Rabbits of West Wind Road. It's about rabbits where I used to live. And then A Cranberry Christmas. It's about a little squirrel who saves Christmas with cranberries, which is a difficult story to understand. But and you were going to say?
I was going to say that, but what is good about your book titles is it makes the potential buyer say, now, what could this possibly be about? And open that book and pick that book up.
Yeah.
And that's so you have that hook right from the cover.
Yeah. And it is interesting because what if I didn't live on West Wind Road?
There you go.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yes.
So, but it is fun, and for me, the first one is a picture book. The Purple Caterpillar pretty much is a picture book, but I wrote it in poetic form, and my illustrator just basically took each stanza and broke it down and found an illustration within those stanzas to create something from. And she did a beautiful job. But it can be difficult to do a picture book with words, and because how can you depict everything that's going on within a scene? I call it a scene.
Right, and the author does not do all the depicting. It's the story, the text, and the pictures move and work together.
Yes.
And you cannot have one without the other.
Right.
And there was one reference I have. I'm sorry I didn't bring the book. He writes. He's an illustrator, and he says that you cannot read a picture book on the radio.
No, you're right.
Yes,
that's
you
true.
Cannot.
That's true.
But the great thing we know is storytelling is a powerful way that we can communicate. And for young children who have limited word recognition, the pictures will carry them through the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It keeps their attention.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah. And I think that's what I do as well. I hope I accomplish is that I actually do tell the story. So even without the pictures, you'd probably understand it with no problem. But the pictures definitely enhance the story
Yeah.
without a
Yes.
doubt. And they do capture the attention of a child.
Yes.
And that is important.
And Judith brought up a good point. I was reading about when you talked about children and interesting them in the title and the book. I was reading about Grace Lynn, who's a great children's author, and she has won the Newbery Award. She talked about especially children's books being a window and a mirror for children. And a window is one of those things where the children walks up to the glass and looks out into the world and says, here's a whole world for me to explore. I see all these different things. However, the mirror is, how do I see myself? What's my reflection look like? What are the things in my life that I like or don't like? What is the reflection that I see back that I might be able to change or not change? And so a book gives a child both of those things, both a window and a mirror, because they're reading about life.
I have a question for you, and I know you both have children, so you both would be familiar with this, with like Dr. Seuss. Would that be as effective without the illustrations? Would you think a child could grasp Dr. Seuss without the illustrations?
That's a difficult question because those illustrations are so unique and powerful in their own way that I've never known the book any other way. That's like taking a bunch of faces and saying, if I take the nose off of them, will they still be the same?
And that's what I'm trying to get at. There are some books where both the illustrations and the words are important.
Yes. Now, normally, if a picture book is written the way that they have academically said authors should write them, one doesn't work without the other.
Right.
If it's truly done, because in the remember in the text you don't discuss or talk about anything that's in the illustration. So that means you can't talk about the big blue coat, you can't talk about the big poppy eyes, and yet if you have the big blue coat and the poppy eyes, what about them? But down in the text you can say the big blue coat is hot, it's making them sweat, because you cannot illustrate hot, you can't illustrate the senses that we have.
Right.
And it's the senses, the 5 senses is what carries the picture book.
So they have to work hand in hand.
They have to work hand in hand, and one doesn't work without the other. They are a joined pair. And rarely can you separate them, unless now a poem is quite different,
right?
Because a poem is pretty complete, but a children's picture book is not that complete. It has to have the illustrations, and it has to have the text, and the one has to help move the story forward.
Well, it's interesting you should say that as well, because in my book, I sent this off to an editor, and she came back and had me take out 4 stanzas. She said it was too long. You would lose their attention, and they're not really pertinent to the story anyway. And I was really reluctant to do so. I'm going to be honest with you, because
we own it.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
yes.
We
own it.
Yeah.
We will brand it and hold on.
Yeah. But I did it. I did take them out.
Yes, and it probably too could have been. I wasn't there. That it was already told. That part of the story was already told in the illustrations.
Well, it really wasn't.
It wasn't.
No.
Okay.
But I think what she was getting at is it was actually a stanza from where these little kids let these butterflies go out on the schoolyard. I talked further into about where the butterflies went, where they landed, and contemplated flying away. And she said, I don't think you need to do that, because they're letting them go on the schoolyard, and now they're on a different journey to meet up with their old classmates who were caterpillars and then are butterflies too.
Yeah.
So she said, I don't know that you really need that because you're making it too wordy. You're making it too much for a child.
Yeah.
You lose their attention after a while.
Oh, the younger children, you can write a picture book with 50 words. And picture books are done in page count of 8, 16, 24. 32 is the most popular on up to about 40, 48.
And mine's 40.
Yeah. and 40 pages is not generally for the very young.
Right. Yeah. But I took a chance, and I'm proud of the book. So
Yeah, and I tell you what, see, to me, that's what's most important, because your enthusiasm will feed over to those little ones.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You haven't missed a beat.
And Judith has a really
Yeah.
good point here, because you're talking about the younger child, and
Yeah.
so you have the bright color, you have a thicker page of each individual sheet. You have maybe a slick cover rather than a porous cover, because they need to hold on to it, and probably
they like shiny.
right.
They
Mom
do
like
like shiny.
and mom needs to clean it,
Yeah.
because children, they do lots of things in their daily activity and maybe not wash their hands all the time. So it needs to be able to be cleanable, and it needs to be able to be tough, because they're going to throw the book, they're going to pick it up, they're going to put it in their toy chest, they're going to hide it underneath their bed, all those things with children's books. So as you said, the illustration and the format of the book is really as important maybe as the words.
It is. And the last 2 books that just came out recently, and we're talking about within a month, The Kaleidoscope Kids and The Midnight Boy from South Sudan. A mother bought them at a book sale, and I later ran into this mother. I said, "Oh, how did your daughter enjoy the book?" She said she loved it. She said because she liked the size of it, and she can walk around with it and hold on to it.
Yeah.
I had never thought
Yeah.
much about that.
Yeah, you're right.
So yes.
That's an interesting take on this as well, because my book is 8.5 by 11. And I'm going to be honest with you. When I did an event last May, and at that event, it was supposed to be a book launching for that book. I didn't have it ready because I was so busy getting the event ready, because it was sponsored by the radio show. I was negligent in getting it ready to go out on the market. So because I have enough supplies in my office, I thought, well, I'll put together a spiral-bound version of this book to take. At least I have something to present.
Yeah.
And the illustrator looked at it, and someone else looked at it, and they said, oh, God, this looks cheap compared to what if it was perfect bound. But you know what we found? When I took it to the event, because it was spiral bound, the parents loved it. And the reason they liked it is because the kid can bend it back without bending in the pages. It's not going to fall apart as easy because it's spiral bound.
Wow. And how about it doesn't shut closed on them just at the moment that they're enjoying those last few words, and it goes boop, and it closes. It didn't do that.
No.
Yeah,
And they
right.
can spread
That's
it out
right.
on their
Good
lap.
point, Judith. Good
Now,
point.
Professionally, I went in, because I went through CreateSpace to do mine, and they don't
They don't.
offer that.
That's right.
So the printable version is perfect bound, but if I had my druthers, I would make it a spiral bound book.
I think that isn't a bad idea when you get into a larger number of pages. It really does make the book more manageable. Yeah.
It's so much easier for the kid to sit there and just turn the pages, and like you said, we don't have to worry about them, bending the pages or trying to press down on the perfect bound book and break, basically break the spine,
Yes.
So yeah.
And those spines are delicate.
Yeah.
Yes. And in one of our quotes when we opened the show, we talked about children being very intelligent, and they know every time you turn that page what words are on that page. So if you don't say the words exactly as you said them the previous time, they back you up. They stop you and they say, no, on page 7 it says, the man said to the dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they are smarter and they are quicker than you can ever imagine. And so if you said something different on page 7, well, you better go back, turn the page, and reread.
Joyce, we didn't talk about you at all. I would like the audience to know a little bit about your background. And you have children, so this is pertinent to what we're talking about.
I do have children. In fact, I was just talking to my grandchild about books, and she's starting college this semester, and the volume of books that she buys, but that's an older age child, but still it's important. You need to be able to carry them around. But yes, my name is Joyce K. Gatchenberger. I publish under that name because the things that made me who I am were the things that happened to me when I was a child. I have an associate and bachelor's degree in nursing from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I have a master's degree from UC Davis in California. I've been an RN for 35 years. I have been an author for a little bit less than that. I'm working on my next book. It is a continuation of my first two books. My first book was called Lines of Listening, which is a expose of generational abuse and marital betrayal, which of course involves children, very vulnerable children. I also, in my third book, talk extensively about two teenage girls in high school who make the story a positive ending, so that's important.
That's good.
Yes. I think that having children either in a story or writing children's books is very important, and I think as I go forward, and I also maintain a blog which is dedicated to health and wellness, I will be including more children-focused information in that blog because I think that especially diabetes too is increasing in our
among
population,
children.
and obesity is increasing in our childhood population, as well as other chronic diseases for children. So my blog is linesoflisteningblog.wordpress.com.
Well, today's show is about the power of a children's story. And one of the things I want to talk about is we're going to be doing an interesting show later on today as well. We're going to be talking later on about diversity in writing, but we're not going to do that so much this show. But I do want to bring up the importance of diversity in writing children's stories. And I'm a writer. I don't care what I write, whether I write children's stories or novels, whether it be science fiction or drama. I always have lessons in my book, always. I actually write the book with a lesson in mind, and it can be several. And one of the things that you had mentioned this, Judith, before we went on air, that we're reaching, you said a few years ago you could not have published the one book.
That's correct.
But the last 2 years have opened up to where it's very acceptable now, and it's needed.
Yes, and the dialogue is there. It's moving back and forth across generations and across ethnic groups. We're no longer shy anymore. We can all open our mouths and we can all express our thoughts and ideas and our feelings. And this put into story really does help to diffuse tension.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. We start with the children. I've always said and I've always believed that prejudice is something that's taught.
Yes.
It's something we learn. We're not born with it. And so I think that children's stories are one of the greatest ways we can teach our children and being, and that's why children's stories are important. And it's really important for parents to go out there and seek out diversity in what they're teaching their children.
Yes. And I can tell you that parents are often shy and don't have the vocabulary to use to explain concepts to young children. For instance, I lived in Prescott, Arizona for a while, and children could live in their neighborhoods, and a white child would never see a black would never see a white.
Right.
So we were in Sears children's department, and the little girl walks up to my 2.5 or 3-year-old son, and she really does, and she rubs his cheek, and she asks her mother, why was he, I don't think she may not use the word black, but why was he black? And the mother she just turned red. She didn't know what to say. All she had to say was because his mother and his father are.
Right, exactly.
It's genetics.
But I think we grew up in a time to where you became afraid. Like, what phrase do I use? Do I use the word black? Do I use African American?
Yes.
How do we express? Do you say, I'm of Irish American descent, or or I'm American Indian? I mean, how do we describe ourselves?
That's right.
Yes.
And that's where the power of story comes in.
Right.
And we as authors can introduce words and concepts and values, and children will take from a book, and not only will they experience it, they don't forget it.
Well, mine, I'm going to give you an example of what my story's about. And I want to talk more about this other book over here that you have. But mine is called The Purple Caterpillar.
Right.
My caterpillars are pink, they're yellow, they're red. But the other caterpillars find this one purple caterpillar to be different. Not that the others aren't different as well, but they're used to each other's color. But they had not seen a purple caterpillar. So they pick on him. And what their butterfly teacher, who has all the colors of all of the caterpillars in her wings, is trying to teach them is that we're all the same. You're not looking the right way. You're not looking at him the right way. And then it goes into a portion to where this little girl at a schoolyard sees this little caterpillar, along with the one caterpillar who decides to be his friend, deciding to cross a sidewalk to go to this big green leafy bush. And as they're going across the sidewalk, the little girl sees him and said, this would make a great science project. This little boy comes up to step on them, and the little girl pushes him out of the way and says, stop being a bully. We can team up together and maybe both get an A. And so she convinces him, make this our science project. And it turned his attitude around, like, I don't have to be a bully to get the attention.
Right.
I can be smart and get the attention. And then it goes back to where now they're butterflies, and they fly off. And the other little caterpillars that are butterflies now too can't believe how beautiful he is. And then Mrs. Kind, their teacher, calls them in for one last class and explains, Doogie's the same as he was when he was the caterpillar. You just saw him differently. You think he's beautiful now, but he was beautiful then. And that's the lesson in my story.
Right. I know. And The Midnight Boy from South Sudan is a book that was used in a classroom and it was a class of diverse students. And this little boy from Ethiopia saw the map of where South Sudan was, and he was sold on the book. He said, look, he's from Africa. That's where I'm from. And immediately he connected to the book and the story.
And that's the importance of what we're doing, is we're painting pictures for kids to understand.
That's right.
And I think that's what you need to look for when you're looking for children's stories, is try and find something that a kid can relate to. And like you said, this kid saw where he's from, and now he has a reason to be proud of that because it's in book form. Yes. You know, he can relate to this.
Like Judith said, the power that the author has for telling children's stories. It is powerful.
Absolutely. Now, you have a book here called Kaleidoscope Kids. What is that about?
Well, what we're finding is that our population is very, very diverse.
Right.
Our neighborhoods, our schools, children are coming in contact with children from all over the world. So Kaleidoscope Kids is a story about children from all the different continents. And the book cover has them all in their native garbs. So when children see them, they really see the differences. They see the difference in their clothes and their complexions. But they're in this town who taunts them and says, oh, they're so different. There are more colors than my kaleidoscope. And that's where the book title came from. But what they found is they were all different from different countries and cultures, but they were able to come together and create a space of their own. And they created a clubhouse on top of the little hill in the town. And the people still stared at them and they pointed at them. But together, they made an American flag. They were in the city parade, and they were the stars of the parade, and they got the trophy, and the mayor asked them to lead the parade every year from now on.
Aww.
And then I'm not going to tell you what's all in between there, but it's a very, very nice story of how they decided to even carry the parade, the flag in the parade.
Right, and how the importance of diversity. It's great to be diverse. Can you imagine if we were all the same?
Yes, exactly. And that's what this
that would be
story
boring.
is showing.
Very boring.
It would be.
Yes,
it would be. Yes. This story was to show how they were all different, and they all brought something from home, and together they sat down and they stitched these pieces together to create the American flag. And they built this hut because Anike, who was from Nigeria, told them how we build huts with mud and rocks and grass. They said, we have all of that right here.
Yeah.
There you
And so
go.
that's how they built their hut. And then they stuck pegs in the walls, and they each brought something to hang on the peg that was theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole space then became something that they loved and felt comfortable with. Because in town, they were teased, but together on that hill, they were good friends.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned from their friendship that it doesn't matter if you're different. If you come together and you share, you become one.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
So
Very true.
that's the importance of when you're writing to think about, what is your theme? I mean, there are stories out there that can be simple stories that they
Yes.
don't have to necessarily be about diversity.
Mhm.
They can be teaching a lesson. We had the science mom. Her whole thing is to teach kids about science.
Right.
And can you hand me that bottle over there? The one,
Sure.
yeah. And I want to make sure I get her name right. So, all right. You weren't on that show, were you?
No,
It was Jenny Boliff.
not that day.
Jenny Boliff has a website dedicated to the Science Mom. It's Jenny Boliff, and it's BALLIF .com. And each one of her segments, she actually does a video with each book. And there are also coloring books. So you can actually get a coloring book that goes along with whatever the science lesson is, and the kids can color it in. And they can also go to the website on YouTube and see. She actually shows you the science project and how it was created. So there are a lot of things we can do with children's book to teach. It doesn't always have to be about diversity. So teaching, it's a tool in which our kids can learn, because you had said that, Judith. Sometimes when they see something physical, it's easier for them, if they can follow
That's right.
along with it, as opposed to
Yes.
just a teacher reading out of a book.
That's right. That's correct. And it isn't, we're not so far removed from the stories that we write, because I can just go back to when I was a little girl in elementary school and what I experienced,
Mhm.
the bullying, the rejection, not allowing me to play in the games and the fun. And those experiences, they stick with you. So as an author, you just go back and you just pull those
Exactly.
concepts
That's right.
up and you put them in the story, and it works, because hate, love, acceptance, the whole gamut of emotions, it doesn't change.
Right.
The words
Mhm.
are the same,
That's
and the
right.
feelings are still the same.
That's right.
And then you just feed on that and write for the children. And that's where that power of children's stories comes from. It also helps them to love to read, because they see themselves and say, oh, it happened to them too, but they were able to overcome.
Yes. Yes.
I had Two Bears Medina on, along with Sue Montgomery, a few shows back, and they wrote a new they're working on a complete series about Itchy the goat. And one of the things, Two Bears is American Indian, and then Sue's Irish. But what we were talking about is, where did these stories come from? And it came from his childhood, like you said.
Yes.
When he was growing up, they had a pet goat. And, I guess, I don't know if kids tease him about having this goat or not, but he was always talking about his goat. And he took those little episodes when he would tell some of the stories as an adult to some of his friends. They laugh. They go, "That's so funny. You should make a story out of that." And so he was talking to Sue one day and said, "You know what? Why can't we just make a children's story out of this? They're true stories. You put them in kids' format." And he said it was amazing that when they're reading in school, what kids come up and ask them questions. But he said what was the most interesting thing is that they want to know everything that's in the book. In the book,
Yes,
they
they
actually
do.
talked about
They
who
do.
the illustrator was. They talked about who the authors were, and the kids were going to, "Who is this? And what is this about?" And then they'd say, "Well, that's me. Oh, well, what about you?" So curiosity. Kids really are curious.
Yes.
What I did with the Kaleidoscope kids is, because they're from all over the world, in the back of the book I have a glossary that has their names and the meaning of any item that's in the story
Great idea.
that isn't a part of the American culture.
Ah.
Great idea.
But in a way, it is a part of the American culture. If someone is here, then it is now part of the American culture.
It is
Yes.
now, but the
Yes.
mothers don't know what it is.
Right.
You
It's
know,
to help.
the
It's to help.
children know.
It's to help the adult who's doing the supervising.
it's
You know,
interesting because I had this elderly friend I used to take care of, and who was not from America, but forgets that she came over here 50 years ago from another country. And oftentimes we would be somewhere, and she would make the comment, "Oh, that's a foreigner." And I go, "Why would you say that?" Well, because you can tell they're like Hispanic, or they're, of Indian descent, or Filipino. And I go, "But why would you think they're a foreigner? They could have been born here.
That's right.
Just because they have a different look doesn't mean that they're not from America. They're American." And she goes, but if I said, "You're really missing the point here. America is everything. We were all foreigners at one time."
That's right.
That's correct. That's correct. So,
And I have a really good quote that I found here, or I guess I would call statistic. It's from the Cooperative Children's Book Center at the University of Wisconsin. It said they looked at 3,200 children's books published in the United States, and they found that only 14% had Black, Latino, Asian, or Native American main characters.
Mm-hmm.
Only 14%.
And that's kind of what Judith was getting
Yes.
at. It's time.
Yes.
They're accepting more and more diversity now.
Yes.
And actually, the younger generation is more curious about it. They actually want to know about it.
Yes, they do.
So this is the time for the children's author to show the diversity.
well, the reason that it wasn't there is the publishers would reject it.
Right, exactly.
And believe it or not,
Right.
parents wouldn't walk up and take those books off the shelf.
And you know what's interesting now? It's a different ball game.
It's very
Because
You're
now
right.
with
You're
self-publishing
right.
the way it is,
Yes.
you can't stop it.
no.
Whereas like you're right. It was the traditional publishers. When I started publishing in 95, if you self-published, you were looked down upon. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Those gatekeepers took it off.
Yeah.
They took the books out of the publication realm.
exactly.
They did.
And it was
They did.
very difficult to get your book in a store back then.
That's correct.
I mean, I did it, but it was hard.
But that's not so far back, James.
I know.
Because I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators maybe 10 years or so ago. When I first joined, self-publishing was a discussion. It wasn't in the literature. It wasn't in our journals. It wasn't talked about. Now it's talked about because we're out there in the numbers and we're having influence and we're having some good results.
And that's the thing. I think what the publishers have missed out on, the traditional publishers, the bigger,
Yes.
the big five, is that kids do want to know more. Today, kids are not. I'll give you an example. I have an office manager who's from Fiji. She's from Fiji, but she's half Indian and half Chinese. And then her husband, is Black. And then each one of their kids, she had children. Now they've married a different race. So those grandkids have a lot of heritage.
Yes, they do.
And I think we're missing the picture in America today is that it's no longer, and probably in 20 or 30 years, it's not going to be a one-race society. We're going to be a multiple race society, in the meaning that we're a mixed race. We're not going to define it by one nationality or another. And that's why it's important to be teaching our children diversity and the importance of what, they accept everyone for who they are, And I'm not just talking about race. I'm talking about looks as well. And you see this with supermodels. It used to be, it was the pencil thin supermodel that was in demand. Twiggy comes to mind. Today, it's opening up to where anyone can be whom they want to be. You have model agencies now who are out there looking for people of normal looks, not just that supermodel image. And I think that's what is changing in society and is needed to change for a long time. So, hooray for the independent author, getting out there and helping make those changes. 53, I know 2 years ago, 53 of the top selling authors on Amazon were self-published. So it's telling the traditional publishers, you need to change your attitude if you want to stay in competition with the self-published author.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. And you can even see Create Space has been...
Yeah, we got to
Be a
talk a
little
little into the
closer.
mic there. There we go.
There you go.
Okay, Create Space is one of the popular publishing companies with self-publishers, and Kindle Direct Publishing has taken it over.
Yes,
Well,
they
yeah,
have.
the Creative Space is going to the wayside. It'll
That's
be
right.
Kindle Direct Publishing.
Why? Because self-publishers are doing a marvelous job, and they're putting out the books, and there's a profit to be made for them.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's
A
right.
tremendous profit actually for Amazon.
Yes, tremendous.
And I don't know how much you know about this, but we do talk about this all the time on the show. Draft to digital is a new format for people when it comes to getting your ebook out there. And they only take 10%. You get 90% of the royalty.
Ooh.
Yes.
So
It's a
that's
great
something to check
program.
into. And you know
Yes.
what they'll do? My latest novel, The Alien Transcripts, came out.
It's draft and then the number
Yeah,
two.
draft.
Tell our listeners.
Oh, I
too.
will. It's
Yes.
draft,
Draft
the number 2,
and the number 2. And then digital.
digital. So it's draft number 2 digital, draft2digital.com. Go to aspectsofwriting.com. It's on my homepage. Just
Okay.
click on that icon there. On Aspects of Writing homepage, at the top to the left,
Yes.
just click on that icon. It'll take you straight to draft to digital.
Thank you.
But what I like
That's
is
it.
they helped me. I'm going to tell you how great they are. Because, I talk about things, but I tried it out. And by the way, they are not a paid promoter. I'm
Right.
just telling you this
Okay.
to share. When I went on there with the Alien Transcripts, I had a question. You call them, you get an actual person in their headquarters in Oklahoma City, and they actually help you. And they actually helped me get it into format. And within, I'd say 4 or 5 days, I had my ebook on Barnes & Nobles, Amazon. Now, the bigger companies like Amazon and stuff will get an additional 5%. So you may only get 85% royalty because they're still going to make their little cut.
Oh yeah.
But-
boy.
But the thing is that you get a greater royalty than if you went through Kindle Direct Publishing. And plus, they put it in all these formats. It's on Kobo, it's on PlayStation. They put it out there on all those ebook outlets for you. Whereas if you just go to KDP, it's on KDP.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So think about draft to digital the next time you want to do your
so-
ebook.
James, that's why I'm here with you and Joyce, because I just got a marvelous piece of information, and I'm sure some of those listeners are out there doing a dance.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah. And, I do like to share with
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
when I hear something good. I think that's the thing that we like about this show is that we do learn something. I learned something. I think I was telling you earlier, Joyce. I mean, not Joyce, but Judith, when we were talking about how I learned something from every guest. And we don't care. When it comes to this show, I don't care if you're a novice or you're the most experienced. I want both because we learn from each other. Because you're going to ask me a question as a novice that I've never heard before. And then if I don't know it, I want to go find out about it. The most experience gives me knowledge every day because you're doing something different than I've ever done, and it makes me want to go out there and try and see if maybe I can do that. So never be afraid to ever come on my show if you're an author
Yeah.
or if you're dreaming to be an author. We want those dreamers.
That's right.
I want to know, how do you target your audience? Do you think about that when you're writing?
Oh, most definitely. Now, you see, I'm from the field of education, so I have had the privilege of being in the classroom with a lot of different age groups. But I would say to the authors, look at the age group that you intend to write for and get out there and be where they are. At the state fairs, at the community centers, at the art fairs, and observe and talk to them, but don't be intrusive.
Right.
You don't want to get up on someone and get into their personal space. Also, the library has reading programs for children, and I always tell my writers, go to the library, let them know that you're there, let them know that you're an author, and sit in the back,
Yeah.
all the way with your back to the wall, and observe. You'll be surprised at that target group that you have in mind. You may have to do a little bit of editing on your book because some of those attention spans can be very, very short, and so short it's shocking.
Well, and
I
found that
Yeah.
That's good advice.
because I found that when of the books I've written, each one is different, and then I realized each one's a different grade level. So you do have to think about that. Maybe not when you're writing it, but most certainly when you get ready to publish it, you have to think about what is your target audience. What age group is it? Because you have to go by what you've written.
And I talk to the school librarians. I invite myself to be a guest author in the classrooms. But you must let the teacher be privy to your book so that she knows it's appropriate for her class.
Mm-hmm.
Let the librarian look at it so that she can approve it for whatever grade level that you're presenting your book for, because the industry has already divided the grade levels up. K, first and second grade, middle grade, third, fourth, and fifth. Everything above the fifth grade would be young adult and then on up. And then there's a new area called tweens, TWEENS. And they're the children that are too young to be children, but not old enough to be teenagers. And they have their own area of interest. And so where those audiences are, you want to try to connect with them. But I tell you what, if you don't get up from that kitchen table and get out of the house, you're not going to connect with anyone.
Right. Yeah.
Like I was talking earlier, the windows and the mirrors, get up there and look through that window and see what life is about.
And that's the hardest thing to do.
It is.
We talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I sit here behind this mic and I can do this. But when I have to go out there, I just had to go do a talk. I had to do a reading. I've never done a reading from one of my books.
Yeah.
I was a nervous wreck.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, and it's so funny to say, yeah, but you interview people all the time. But yeah, it's my show. It's a lot easier to sit here and do this.
Yeah.
But when I have to go out there and present, it's much more difficult.
The other thing that you can do is volunteer for these children's programs, because a lot of programs need help. The theaters that work with children need help. But I will tell you something that's comical. I was substitute teaching, and I decided I was invited to substitute teach in this program where the courts place children or teenagers that are one step from jail.
Uh-huh.
I said, oh, great. This gives me an opportunity to work with teenagers, to hear their dialogue, to listen to them, to talk to them. Well, it wasn't much they said that I could put in my book. And then I had one student, he just loved to talk to me. He goes, Miss Lalude, you said Miss Lalude, how about Miss Lalude, Miss Lalude? I didn't understand a word he said.
There you go.
And I'd ask him to repeat it. He repeated and repeated. So one day I had taken my son with me. And so this student comes up again, Miss Lalude, Miss Lalude, how about Miss Lalude? So on the way home, I asked my son, I said, did you understand what he said? He said, yes, mother. He was asking you blah, blah, blah. I said, wait.
How did you know that?
So he was speaking a young person's language.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I hadn't a clue what he was saying to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I thought, here I have these students over here who are not using the Queen's English, so I can't put it in the book. I have this set over here who are talking the young people's language. I can't even understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the experience of being there with them, I loved it.
There you go.
We recently experienced a show where you were on that show.
Yes.
Where we had a younger, I won't say they were young, but they were half my age easily, that were on the show. And I had the most difficult time starting the show because I didn't understand where they were coming from. They didn't want to give us their name. They didn't want to tell us a lot. And I said, we can't do a show if we're not talking. We have to talk because it's a radio show.
Yes.
But then once they started talking, and Joyce, you actually had researched that and talked about the two variations of writing.
Yes.
It actually became interesting because we got inside the heads of that young group and how they write. And it kind of was fascinating. But it's really difficult sometimes to break the ice with a different generation if you don't quite understand what they're talking about or where they're coming from.
You have to use their words. If you find 4 or 5 words that they use that you can identify with, that you might probably know the meaning of, they think that you know what you're talking about.
But you actually taught him some words.
I did.
About what he was talking about.
Yes, I gave him a platform to work
Right.
from. Yes, you're
Yeah.
right. You're right.
I think that when you're working with teenagers and young adults, whether you speak their language or not, the one thing they want you to be is real
Right.
Yes.
and honest. And they are there to hear your words.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. We've already talked about the importance of illustrations, so I'm going to kind of skip that because it's definitely important if the illustrations match the words.
Well, let me say this to self-publishers who are illustrating. Go to the bookstores, look at the book covers, see what is popular. Look at the colors. Look at the characters. I can remember once I went in and there were very few book covers that didn't have children with big poppy eyes. And so that your art doesn't fall too far out of step with what the book covers are showing in real time.
Right. Where I kind of know, but where do your ideas come from for your books, the children's stories?
Ooh, I have so many ideas, but I think when I look around and I see where children are struggling, and I see where a story can make a difference, then I start writing. Because Joyce mentions diabetes.
Yes.
Do you know that I've written a story, a young reader's chapter book on a little boy who has diabetes? And guess what has stopped me?
What's that?
Billy's Too Sweet.
Billy's
The
Too Sweet.
title won't fly.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I've got to change the title, and but I still have it in my files, and it is still a book to be written, because just like Joyce said, the number of children with diabetes is just off the charts.
Yeah.
And it was off the charts so fast that the pediatricians didn't even know how to treat it because it was never a
That's
problem
right,
in pediatrics.
Yeah.
You might want to try Billy's Sweet Struggle.
Sweet struggle,
Mm.
yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I don't think about what to write when it comes to children's stories. I just think like a kid. When I'm in that mode, I actually think I am a kid. I put myself like if I was this kid, or like the one who's about a little squirrel, and I'm thinking if I was this little squirrel sitting on the side of a pond, how would I react to Farmer Bill? How would he react to me? What would my parents say if I went back and said I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that? And that's really, I almost put myself in the mode of the little creature I'm trying to write about.
I don't just put myself in the mode. I have put myself down on the floor to look at the point of view.
Very good.
Yeah.
Get down on your knees.
Get
and,
down
and
on your
walk
knees,
around. Yes,
and look up and see, what did my character see kneeling on the floor from under the table? And it was quite different than when I was sitting up, looking up, and writing.
I'm going to tell you something. That's a very poignant observation in the sense that it's not just true for children but for animals as well. And I'll give an example why what you just said is important. I adopted a little dog who had been abused and abandoned. She was scared to death. First time I brought her home in the car, she shook all the way. First time I took her in the car somewhere, she shook all the way. Now she's gone across country with me all the way to the East Coast and come back. To this date, now she's constantly, when I take her once a night for a drive, she's looking out the window. She wants to see everything. She wants to know, because she's seeing a different world. She's seeing things different than when she was abused and abandoned, because she's at an elevated level where she can see things better. And I think that's what we have to look for when we're writing, is to elevate ourselves to see things in a different light, just like a child would.
Absolutely. A good point. Good point.
We've not asked you yet, so where can we find out about your books?
Oh, you can come to my website, Judith Camille, CAMILLE.com. And when it opens up, it'll say J. Camille Cultural Academy, and there is a bookstore, and you can see all of my publications. And if you're interested in writing for children and teens, my prompter just came out.
Oh, good.
So you can get that, and it gives you a lot of information, even on layout and design. Has a place where you can help design your book, cover, your business cards, etc. And they're all available on Amazon.
Yeah, all your books are on Amazon.
All
I know
my
that.
books are on Amazon.
And they're soon going to be on Draft to Digital and ebook format.
Definitely.
There you go. Draft to Digital. Here we come.
Joyce,
Yes.
where can we learn about your books?
You can go to my website, which is linesoflistening.com. You can also get information about it from my blog, linesoflisteningblog.wordpress.com. And, of course, everything's available on Amazon.
All right. And my book, The Purple Caterpillar, is available on Amazon.com.
Right.
Currently, it's not in ebook format, but soon it will be.
I'd like to say one thing. 2 of my books have audios. Now, the audios, you will have to contact me at jclalude@gmail.com. Miss Lucy Slave in Civil War is in audio, braille, and large print.
Wow.
Because I found that I was not able to reach out to a large segment of my population in Louisville, and that was the blind and the hearing and sight impaired.
Well,
And the Long Walk also has audio.
all right. Just so you know, Drafted Digital has a company they work with that does audio.
Hot dog.
And,
There
you know,
goodness.
they give you the illustrator. I mean, they give you the actors and everything for the voices overs and
Yes.
stuff. So you might want to
Wow.
check that out while you're on Drafted
Yes.
Digital as well.
Matter of fact, I have a book, Dunker, which young people love. It's about basketball, prom, first date, first kiss. And I want to do that in audio because I'm trying to reach also the English as a second language young people so that they can all read the book together.
Check it out. Go
I
to Drafted
sure
Digital.
will.
They'll tell you all about the audio where you can do your audio.
There you go.
I'm loving this more and more.
There you go.
Hot dog.
All right, we're getting down to the last minute of the show, so I would like to thank our guest, Judith C. Owens-Lalude, and my co-host, Joyce K. Gatchenberger. Boy, you two give me some names, I'll tell you.
There we go.
To find links to our guest website, please visit aspectsofwriting.com. There you will also find the video to our past shows. You can also find those on youtube.com on Aspects of Writing, youtube.com/Aspects of Writing. And all our shows are archived on Aspects of Writing. You'll also find the syndicated shows, the links to all the syndicated shows, which include iHeart, iTunes, and we broadcast this show live on amfm247.com on Saturdays at 1 p.m. We're on 14 different terrestrial stations, so just check my website for those. We're also on Roku TV, and just go to aspectsofwriting.com. We're now on Blog Talk Radio at 9 o'clock on Sunday evenings. That's Pacific Standard Time as well. And if you go to Aspects of Writing, just click on there, go through the whole page, you'll see everything we're talking about. So until next week, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.